All right, welcome back everyone. So now we can proceed with the next session with Prof. Azma, validating the questionnaire. So without further ado, let's welcome Prof.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tan. Let me share first. Okay, so basically, just now I'm telling you about to develop the questionnaire. As I can say, it's not very easy, but whatever it is, if let's say you adopt and then you translate into Malay, you have to do a validating. If let's say you adapt and modify, you also have to do validation. So basically, most of the time you need to do a validation because sometimes the population is different, right? The original questionnaire was developed among Western countries. So you need to have a validation again to see whether the value for validating is still good or not. Okay, so but most of the time, especially when you adopt, you just straight away use for the English version. That one is okay. Okay, you do need to do a pre-test, but you still need to do a pilot test to get a Tromba alpha. But you do not need to do other types of validation because the content is actually already okay because the previous researcher already done for that. But please make sure that the previous researcher that you use the questionnaire, they have some value on view of the validations. Because sometimes the researcher may develop the questionnaire, but they do not do a validations. Then you have to do again for our population. If they say they have done the content validity, they have done the construct validity, whatever validity with the value, then it's okay. You can straight away do a pilot test just to get the Tromba alpha value. That's all. Very easy, very shortcut. But if let's say this one is not, then you have to do a full validation. Okay. So today I continue back for how to validate a questionnaire. Bear in your mind, this is only one hour lecture. Sometimes some of the information I cannot deliver because too many, and this is not a 1 hour lecture basically because the step is actually very lengthy. Okay, this is actually one article mentioned how for you to do a questionnaire from starting from the scratch into the validations. Okay, so the part that the one that issue important is actually a validation. You must do a validation before you can go to your study population and get the response of the one that for you to answer your research questions. Bear in mind that there is a pure psychometric. We consider non-psychometric. We are not in detail of the questionnaire. Okay, so for people who develop a questionnaire from the scratch and more toward the psychometric is actually more detail that you need to have. Basically, you need to test the content itself. Is it the validity? Is it good or not? There are some value you need to analyze and mention in your thesis. Okay, and of course you need to do other type of validity. But most of the time, it's actually we are under non-psychometric things. Okay, so basically we just identify the questionnaire from the literature. Okay, basically we adapt and adopt. Okay, so sometimes if we would like to create, we must base on some theory. So to develop a questionnaire from the scratch is actually you must have some theory or model behind that. Okay, and if let's say you adopt and then you translate into Malay or whatever language that you want to use, you need to do a back-to-back translation, pre-testing, and then you need to do piloting. So the piloting, basically you do EFA, exploratory factor analysis, and then you do a real study, your study field, and then at that time you need to do CFA, confirmatory factor analysis. So that one we call a full validation. Some study if sometimes when you Google any things that related to questionnaire, the result until EFA only. Okay, so it depends. Some of people they say that no need to do CFA, but the good one is actually EFA and CFA for you to say that your questionnaire is very good and very deep. And because of the time, especially when you have a very limited in time to do a research, sometimes you can stop at EFA. Okay, but if for PhD, no, there's a must for you to do CFA. So this one already mentioned, basically adopt direct translation or you may adapt. And please make sure this is very critical things that when you modify, you must make sure that you do not alter the terms and sentence structure because this is the original one. When they develop the questionnaire, they based on theory and model. But the thing that you must make sure that is actually towards our cultural adaptation, so that normative. Make sure that because sometimes some terms when you modify is actually not really suitable for our culture, our population. Then because of that, you have to change. Okay, so that one is actually more towards the content validity. Okay, you know already about this one. So basically, this one already mentioned just now that you need to have step by step before you have the questionnaire. Okay, so first I go for the questionnaire translation. Most of us, especially when we have a very limited time, you Google and you found some questionnaire in English. You Google in Malaysia or in Indonesia or Brunei, which maybe use the Malay language. There's no Malay version, so you can translate. If let's say, but to make it short, straight away use Malay version. So if you use Malay version, it's already translated, right? So the thing is that you just do a pilot study to get the format of value. Okay, no need to do full validation. Okay, so if let's say the translation, basically we do the process is good to do standardized. Meaning that very systematic, so that to ensure that the questionnaire is valuable, complete, accurate, and cultural appropriate. You must thinking of cultural. If you Google in view of the questionnaire, some of the articles they mention that cultural adaptation because we adapt to our cultural. Okay, so for the questionnaire translation, of course, for the preparation, you have to find first. You have to find and when you got that questionnaire, whatever language, especially English. Okay, if let's say you are Chinese, you can use a Chinese version and translate into Malay or translate into English, whatever language that you want to use. Okay, so to translate, basically you can do single direct translation, modified direct translation, or back translation. The best way is actually back translation. Single direct is that you just direct into Malay, that's all. Okay, modified direct translation, you translate and you modify a little bit. But the best way is actually you translate into English into Malay and you back translate English in Malay into language. So meaning that there are two ways of translation, from back forward and backward. Forward English to Malay, and after that Malay into English back. That one is the best. Okay, recommended. Then after you have done the translation, the process of the translation also for English to Malay, at least two people there, two translator, okay, who have a certificate for this language from English to Malay. Meaning that they must understand English, they must understand Malay also. Okay, there are two people there, and after you have done, you have to combine and choose the final one, Malay one, and then give to others translator to translate from English, from Malay to English back. Okay, and after that, you need to sit down with the four translators, the two English Malay, another two is actually Malay English. Sit down together with your supervisor, with the team, to choose and discuss for you to come out the final questionnaire after the translations. Okay, And after that, if already satisfied, then you can do a pre-test. And then you can go ask the respondent with a small sample whether they understand or not the questionnaire that you already translate. Okay. And of course, after that, you have to revise. Sometimes respondents say, I do not understand the term of blah, blah, blah. So you have to go back, revise and compare and check the terminology. Okay. And maybe you need to do again the pre-test. Okay, until satisfied. Okay, but if you do at the beginning in very good way, the pre-test is only one time only. Okay, and of course, during the process of the translation, everything must be documentation. Each step in the translation, from original reason, this is the original one, how they change, and what is the result of the pre-test methods, and is there any changes on this translation process. So that is actually basic. This is not validity yet, it's just the content validity under the translations. So we go into validity. So what is validity? The validity, valid meaning that the ability of a scale to measure what is intended to measure. If they want to measure about the knowledge, it's actually measure about the knowledge. Okay, the extent to which a measure reflects the real meaning of the concept under consideration. The extent to which a measure reflects the opinion and behavior of the population under investigation. So it must reflect whatever that you want to ask. Okay, so basically it must be valid first. Okay, so cannot be valid unless also valuable. So you need to have two. It must be valid, it must be valuable also. Okay, so what is that valid? Valid means that to measure what is intended to measure. If you want to measure the knowledge, it should measure the knowledge, not about the attitude. There are two different things. So it depends on the purpose of the measure. For example, ruler may be valid measuring device for length, but is not valid for measuring volume. So that is actually the meaning of the validity. Whatever they intend to measure. So ruler, of course, you want to measure the length, but you cannot use to measure the volume, even though you think that one is okay, right? So it's measuring what is supposed to measure. So that is the meaning of the validity. The types of validity is actually the thing is actually for especially when you use the translations. Is actually the phase and content validity. Okay, the content validity when you develop the content, basically when after you translate, you give the questionnaire to the expert. Okay, the best to give the expert how many people we ask how many. So the base is actually between 5 to 7. Okay, 5 to 7 is actually ganjil, not genap. 5 to 7, because if ganjil nanti the score is actually will be in the middle. So if the ganjil, the score will be more or high lah. Okay, so you give whatever that you have done your translation into the expert. 5 to 7 expert. Expert means that in the phase of your research questions. If they are about diabetes, you must give to the expert of diabetes, endocrines, whatever. Okay, so a mixture of expert you must give. Okay, so when you give, they will rate your items. There is a choice to choose 1 to 5. Is it the item is okay or not? Something there is a standard question actually. There is an handout I give to you. There are some examples from there. Okay, so that value is actually for you to calculate the content validation index. Okay, and for the phase, besides just give the questionnaire and ask them which part they did not understand. It's good that you also give the same thing like you give the expert and ask them to give a score. Is it this item is understanding or not or whatever? And also from there you can get the phase validity index. So there is a score, right? There is an index to say that more than 0.8 is actually a good one. Meaning that in view of the content and phase validity is already good. So people don't ask further because the content is actually ready. Okay. And after that, basically, we will do a construct validity. Okay, so under construct validity, beside the translation is actually criterion. Criterion means that you already have a questionnaire. You compare with the gold standard of the questionnaire. Okay, you compare. There is a, for example, there is the gold standard to measure on knowledge is a questionnaire A. So you develop a new one because a little bit change. So you can compare with the gold standard. That one we call criterion validity. Most of the time, the researcher will not do that because sometimes we don't have the gold standard. Okay, and under criteria, under construct validity, they also have convergence and discriminant. And this is very important. This is actually EFA, CFA value will give you the result. Okay, so that one is actually the validity. Okay, after valid, basically, after everything is valid, the content validity is okay, face validity okay, your construct validity or the EFE value is okay, CFA value is okay, then you can do reliability. And most of the time it's actually combat alpha, and I'm sure that you know about combat alpha, which is actually referred to reliability. Meaning that what does it mean? Repeated measurement of a stable phenomena by different people and instruments at different times and place get similar result. You ask today, they say one. You ask a month later also they say one, which give a similar result. So it's actually reliable. Okay. So reliability is concerned with the accuracy of the actual measuring instrument or procedure. Validity is concerned with the study success at measuring one. Okay, so two different things, but we need both. Okay, for the questionnaire validity, I already mentioned about face validity, which is more towards for us to testing the understanding and comprehension. So the second part is the content validity. It's actually towards the relevant to the topics. That's why we ask the expert, because the expert know about the topic. Is it suitable or not to ask? Is it they agree on the items, even though you even though you already translated. Okay. Criterion validity I mentioned just now is actually when you have a gold standard, it's good that you have criterion validity. Okay. And after that, it's actually construct validity. So construct validity is actually you try to find the factor loading. So we do factor analysis or EFA, exploratory factor analysis, as well as CFA. So you must start with factor and EFA first, exploratory factor analysis first, by having a pilot study. And after that, you need to do another data collections, which is your real data collection, to do CFA, confirmatory factor analysis, just to confirm that your questionnaire is actually validated. And after that, you can do reliability. And most of the time, we are using combat alpha. Okay, we also can use kappa, but most of the time, it's actually combat alpha. Okay. So the content validity is actually, you can do a workshop, but now it's a very easy. You can do one by one. It's not necessarily by workshop. Okay, to get the content. Okay, to get the content. If let's say from scratch, then you need to have a workshop to come up with the items. Okay, for the content validity. If let's say just translation, you just email to the expert and or ask them to give a score, whether it's good, understanding, clarify or not, and so on. Okay, that one is content validity, and the expert is basically 5 to 7. You can have 9, you can have 11. Okay, but it's not easy to get the expert, right? At least minimum 5. Okay, so for the face validity, it's actually pre-testing. You go and find 5 to 10 respondents. Some people find more than 10. But at least 5 to 10 respondents, and you ask the understanding of the sentence, and then you also can give the questionnaire for them to rate your questionnaire, to rate the understanding, clarification, and so on. Okay, and you also can analyze and get the face validity index. Okay, the criterion validity, as I said just now, is actually when you have a gold standard. So you can have concurrent, meaning that you ask at the same time, or you ask now and another times you ask later. So that one we call predictive. So if let's say your outcome is actually continuous data, numerical. Therefore, you will use Pearson correlation. If your data is category, you will use sensitivity and specificity. Okay, the construct validity is actually the one, most of the researcher, most of the students actually get headache because you need to apply the analysis of EFA. Okay, at least minimum is EFA, but the best to add CFA. But of course, because we have very unlimited, at least EFA. So basically, for the construct validity, we cover on convergent. It must be converged, meaning that the items must be different with the items we call discriminants. Okay, and it covers each other. So that when we ask about knowledge, we have knowledge attitude, for example. So knowledge, there are some items, attitude, there are some items. We must make sure that it's actually convergent and discriminant, so that you are not asking the same question. And you thought it's different, but the analysis will tell you whether it's actually convergent or discriminant from each other. And of course, the analysis actually for the questionnaire with numerical, that we use EFE and CFA. Okay, and if let's say you have very extreme group analysis, actually you need to apply to the extreme group, to the cases and normal, and see the independent test or sensitivity and specificity. But most of the time we use the number 2. Okay. So content validity, how well elements of the test relate to the content domain. So how closely content of question in the test relates to the content of the curriculum, directly relates to the instructional objective and the fulfillment of the same. Major concern of the achievement test where content is emphasized. Can you test students on things that they have not been taught? It's something like that. You never taught, you never teach the student about that one, then suddenly you ask, cannot. So that is actually the content. The content must be valid. So I already explained how for you to test this content validity. Face validity, of course, is actually our aim for them to make sure that the respondent understand. Okay, so does it appear to measure what is supposed to measure? Okay, sometimes you need to ask the respondent. Okay, for the question number 1, what do you understand question number 1? So the respondent tell blah and blah and blah. And when the respondent tell you no, oh, this is wrong, this is not what I mean it's otherwise. So meaning that there are some misunderstanding, and of course you need to change some of the sentence. Okay, so let's say you are interested in measuring propensity towards violence and aggressions by simply looking at the following items. State which one qualify to measure the variable of interest. Okay, so you have to make sure they understand. Okay, have you been arrested? Have you been involved in physical fighting? Do you get angry easily? Do you sleep with your sock on? Suddenly, can you see or not? And suddenly, do you sleep with your sock on? Which is actually not towards the violence and aggressions. So this is actually the items actually suddenly you miss out. Okay, which is not. But this one is supposed under the development, under the content itself. So the expert, basically the expert and the respondent of your field for the face validity, we give a content and face validity. Okay, so content and face validity, you can use this one, CVI, content validity index. Basically, we write C, content validity index and content validity ratio. So that is actually the formula. Okay, there is actually formula. If you, let's say, if you Google, there is actually calculator to calculate this one. Okay, you need to have, because when you give a questionnaire, right, to the expert, and then you ask them to score 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3 and 4 is actually the one that you want. So what are the number of vectors who give in 3 and 4? How many of them per total number of vectors? And you will get the CVI, and after that you can get the CVR. It's also the same for the face validity. The formula also is the same. Another technique is actually by having fuzzy Delphi technique. This is actually recently is actually quite familiar for ours in medical. It's actually more towards social science. Okay, also can be used to calculate in view of the expert. And there are some criteria to say that the content is valid or not. It's actually a basic thing. It should be more than 0.8. Same also with the CVR and CVR. Okay, so this is the questionnaire I mentioned just now. Okay, in my handout also I give. This is degree of relevance. When you give to expert and when you do a pre-test, you ask them, is it the item is relevant to the measured domain and so on. Okay, so the expert will give their opinion, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 score. And from there, you calculate the CVR and CVR. Okay, and basically, if at least you have, if let's say you don't have many experts, you only have 2 experts, therefore you need to have at least 0.8. But if you have many experts, 3 to 5, it should be 1. And this is some of the recommendation. But in general, it's actually, it should be more than 0.8. Okay, and this is the formula for you to calculate the content index. Some, if you Google some of the in view of this content, some only calculate content validity index for the expert only. For the face validity, just that they give the respondent maybe 5 to 10 people and asking whether they understand or not. They do not calculate for the face validity index. It's okay, at least one of that. Okay, but if of course the more is better. If you have both content and face validity index, and that one is better. Okay, so from there you can see that you can say that how many percent say is actually relevant, clarity, simplicity, and ambiguity. So this is the core, and we get the overall of suppose more than 0.8. Okay, most of the time I notice that from my experience, most of the time expert will give the score is actually 4, which is come out at the end. When you put it's actually equal to 1, and at the end it becomes CVR is 1, which is most of the time. But it depends on the expert. Okay, so when you have done that one, basically the pre-test. So now you will done a pilot test, a pilot study. Okay, so basically why we do a pilot study, because sometimes some question may be ambiguous. We don't know whether that one is actually the item is actually under knowledge or under attitude. Sometimes we get confused. We don't know. See, by having this pilot, the factor analysis will separate whether the item is actually under knowledge or under attitude. Because sometimes we have some ambiguous and difficult questions. So from there, when we have this pilot study, we can delay, or if we have time, we can revise and do again a pilot study. But most of the time, we have very limited time, right? We just delete the item which is actually ambiguous, and which is from the analysis actually suggests to delete. Okay, and of course, doing pilot study is good that we record the time. Okay, because in the instruction, the cover letter, this is the time that we measure is about 30 minutes for you to answer the question, for example. Okay, and of course, you need to assess the range of the response choice. Okay, one of them is actually the straight lining. Straight lining means that all is 4, 4, 4, 4. You have to check the response. That's why the good is actually when you design the questionnaire, at least you have a variety. Your dependent may be the Likert score 7. The knowledge may be 5, attitude 5, practice maybe 5 is okay. And maybe another one is actually about the quality of life, maybe the rating score of 10, for example. So you have a variety so that you can assess the range of the response choice. Okay, and of course, by having the pilot study also, we can see the completeness of the response. Which question actually most of the times that they will refuse to answer, for example. And of course, they will improve the internal validity. Okay, so as I said just now, when you do a pilot study as a student, at least for a master level, you need to do at EFA, exploratory factor analysis. So how to calculate the sample size actually, okay, for you to do. How many sample size for you to do pilot study? So basically, you need to see your items. How many items? If let's say you have 20 items, so 20 times 3 the minimum, 5 the maximum. Try 3 to 5 per items. So 20 times 3 is actually 60 people you need to ask for you to run the EFA. Okay, so basically this is a basic rule of thumb by Costello, 3 to 5 items for EFA. Okay, but there is also from other researchers, they suggest that if you have more than 4 or more factor loadings meaning that how they load. When you do EFA, they are factor loading. If your factor loading, we would like to have at least 0.4 and above. Some suggest 0.5. Okay, so the best is actually 0.5. Okay, the more better is actually more than 0.6. Okay, if let's say you have 0.6, 4 and more, then you can have any sample size because it's very good. But if you're lesser, then you need to have a big sample size. But to make it easier, just use the rule of thumb, 3 to 5 per item for EFA. Okay, so this is an example. If you have 40 items, means that if you take the 42 times 200 subjects. Okay, so if you use the simulation just now, you need to have at least 300 subjects. Okay, so if let's say your question consists of 4 factors, 4 factors means that there is domain A, domain B, domain C, and domain D, and in total 20 items. And then from the original, you have to find out what is the original factor loading. If let's say more than 0.7, then you can use any sample size for the simulation study. But basic rule of thumb, you just times 5 or 3. Okay, the minimum 3, the maximum is 5 for the EFA. For the CFA, the rule of thumb by clean is actually 5 to 10. If let's say you are using 3 for EFA, then for CFA you have to use 5. If let's say you are using 5 for the EFA, then for CFA you have to use 10 per items. Okay, so there is also a simulation study by Hay et al. Also, but that one is actually very complex. It's difficult to explain for you within this limited time. Just use the rule of thumb only. Okay, so that one is actually for you to do a pilot study and the real study to get the validity. Okay, so the construct validity, why we call construct for each of the items is actually under one construct, or we call domain, or one concept, or one idea, or one factors. We tend to use factors, right? But for the questionnaire, it's actually we use a construct, means that one factor, knowledge is actually one construct, attitude is actually one construct, practice is actually one construct. And between the construct, it should be convergent. Convergent means that the items that are meant to measure a construct are correlated to each other. Means that the items measure the same thing. The knowledge construct, the items under the knowledge should be measured under the same thing for the knowledge. Right? That one convergent. You have knowledge, you have attitude questionnaire. This discriminant validity means that the item for different construct, knowledge, and attitude are not correlated to each other. Means the item measure different things. This item measure for the knowledge, this item measure for the attitude, different things. So this is actually the basic for the construct validity. We are assessing the convergent and discriminant validity. Okay, so factor analysis, basically EFA, we use to prove construct validity. For example, orange, motorcycle, bus, durian, banana, car. Do these 6 items have something in common? And when you see, you can see that it's actually a fruit, motorcycle, bus, car, which is, it can be, orange, durian, banana is actually under one category. One construct we call fruit, another construct is vehicle, motorcycle, bus, and car. So this is actually EFA factor analysis do for you. They group into the same items into one group, into fruits groups and into vehicle groups. Okay, they try to find something in common, which is group or factoring the item and naming. When you see, you need to name the factors. Okay. So between EFA and CFA, EFA is actually you explore the items, and then from there you know that the items actually belong to which construct. Okay, so it generates a theory there. And for EFA, no prerequisite to specify theoretical factors. There's no theory behind that. Whatever the items, we see they go into whatever construct. And the items is actually free loading. The rotation, because in the analysis of EFA, there is a rotation. And this rotation is actually allow us to allow simpler solution. Okay, that one is actually more towards the analysis. Okay, and there's no hypothesis tested for this EFA. But for CFA, it's actually confirmatory. This is actually confirmatory. So that's why I say for the full validation, it's actually supposed together with CFA. Because E meaning that exploratory, C means that confirmatory, meaning that you have to confirm your questionnaire and you have to do structural equation modeling to do this CFA. EFA you can do by SPSS. CFA you cannot do by you need to do you need to use SPSS with MOS, which is have structural equation modeling. Okay, and for you to have to do CFA, you need to have some pre-specific theoretical factors. There are some theory behind. For example, have belief model. So because of that, it actually leads to the intention. So you need some have pre-specific theory behind that. Okay, and basically CFA is actually you just to confirm, and there are no cross-loading. There's no cross-loading because you already EFA. The item is already under that construct, and you already the knowledge under knowledge, attitude under attitude. It's not more the cross-loading. Okay, and for the CFA, there's no rotation. It's just for EFA. Okay, and of course CFA there are some fitness index that you need to fulfill. So very lengthy analysis for CFA, but EFA is very simple analysis. This is the step for EFA, which I summarize that you need to analyze, go for the factor analysis, select for the items, and then interpret the findings. Okay, and of course, the key here when you do EFA, you need to click this descriptive for KMO, which is supposed more than 0.6. So basically, when you see the result of EFA, it's supposed the correlation matrix is actually more than 0.3 with a p-value less than 0.05, and KMO the best is actually more than 0.7, but some study, some previous papers say can be more than 0.6. But that must be p-value less than 0.01 and eigenvalue is more than 1. And when you go further for your SPSS output, the commonality should be more than 0.3, indicate the convergent validity. Okay, and then the factor correlation, suppose less than 0.5, indicate discriminant validity. Correlation between knowledge and attitude is actually less than 0.85, meaning that there's no multicollinearity. So this is the basic analysis for EFA. Okay, so basically based on the result, you need to make judgment whether you want to delete or you want to reward and do again. If you reward, then you have to repeat the pilot test and reanalyze until you're satisfied. That's why it's not easy actually if you started from the scratch of the questionnaire development. For the CFA, it's basically you deals with measurement model validity, and the model should be good, meaning that the fitness should be good. And how we measure is basically this is the value of the model fitness. Okay, so that we can say that for the CFA, the construct validity, convergence and discriminability is fulfilled before you are able to do further analysis of your questionnaire, and you can distribute to your respondent. Okay, this is example of CFA. Okay, how to analyze and so on. Okay, that one is actually validity. Now we go for reliability. Reliability, most of us actually familiar with number alpha, right? When you have outcome or score or numbers, right? So we see number alpha is actually measuring internal consistency. The score are correlated between items of the same questionnaire. So the number alpha basically we would like to have more than 0.7. Okay, another way is actually you can do test with test. You ask today and then you repeat 2 weeks after. That what we call test with test. You also can do inter-matter or inter-matter agreement. Okay, so that one is actually the analysis of intra-class correlation for the numerical data. But if you have a category, that one is we call kappa analysis. Okay, but most of the time we use Comba alpha. And as I said just now, if you already have a good one, it's already validated, it's already in Malay version, you may do a pilot study just to say how good is your Comba alpha. That's all. Okay, so Comba alpha is actually indicate internal consistency, the correlation between item in a construct, and indicator of convergent validity apart from being an indicator of availability. And of course, availability, after you do it, you have to check by domain. Okay, so this is the step of Comba alpha. You need to analyze, and at the end, you will get the Comba alpha, which is the ideally is actually supposed more than 0.7. This is criteria validity. If you have a gold standard, you can do straight away concurrent, or you can do later that we call predictive. Okay, so this is example. The questionnaire is actually depression, but we have another set of questionnaire. So you can straight away do concurrent validity, or you can do later that we call predictive validity. For example, you test on knowledge. So you want to see, you compare the gold standard with the final exam CGPA. So that one we call predictive validity. So in summary, for the questionnaire, if validated in Malay, you have to do Comba alpha, but make sure there is a validation result. If you adopt or adapt from English, you will need to do validity and variability. Of course, go for the content validity, the translation process, and give the expert panel. Give to the do pre-test for the face validity, and after that, the final questionnaire, go for the pilot study to get the EFA for the construct validity, and you may proceed with the CFA, and of course, reliability at the end, so that your validity and reliability is fulfilled. So conclusion, this is the step design, stages a step taken, the content validity, please make sure, face validity, pilot study, and you need to make judgment on your EFA result, so that your final version, before you're able to distribute to your respondent. CFA just to confirm your measurable tools, and you may or may not do criteria validity. So I think that's all lecture for this topic.
Thank you very much, Prof. Azma. So there are a few questions in the chat box, and I think some of them have already been answered during Prof's presentation. But I think it's good for Prof to reiterate this point. So I will just read the question and let's hear answers from Prof. So the first one, for face validity, do we have to give to experts also?
You have to give to expert first. You give to expert first. That one we call content. That one we call, some say it's actually under content validity. Some say it's actually also fall into face validity. So actually, yes, give to the expert first, and then after that, give to your respondent under your study populations.
The second question is, can you explain further on how to use fuzzy Delphi technique to do the calculations? Oh,
fuzzy Delphi technique is very lengthy one. It's actually the technique is actually is actually the same like CVI, CVR, but because the fuzzy is actually more on the agreement of the items. It's actually there is a standardized formula for the calculate. Okay.
Okay. So what are the pros and cons of CVI versus fuzzy Delphi technique?
Both are good. Both are good. Please do only one. If you do CVI, then enough. If you do fuzzy, then enough with fuzzy. Both are good. Okay, both are good because both fuzzy also using the expert. CVI also using the expert. Both are using the expert, but the formula is different, and the ranking, the calculation a little bit different.
Would you mind explaining why is 5 to 7 experts the best number of experts to validate a questionnaire, and not the more the better?
It's not. You can have more, but it's not easy to get the expert. So at least you can go for at least 3. You can go into 5 or 7, but in ganjil, because sometimes when the score is actually bigger, so that the ganjil will decide which one actually for you to say is good or not. Okay, so from the paper, basically everything must be eliminated. From the previous paper, this is 5 to 7.
Okay, what is the minimum sample size for both EFA and CFA? And can we use the same sample in the pilot study for both EFA and CFA?
Okay, the minimum sample size, as I mentioned just now, if you need to use the rule of thumb for the EFA 3 to 5, CFA 5 to 10. But the thing is that most of the time, the CFA is actually your study population, the real study. So when you collect the sample, before you analyze to answer your research objective, you need to do CFA first. If CFA okay, there are some items sometimes maybe deleted again, then the final one is actually the one that you need to analyze to answer your research objective.
Can the pre-testing sample be used for retesting, or for test-retest new sample needs to be taken? And what is the ideal sample size for test-retesting?
Okay, the test retest is actually you can use the pre-test sample. Okay, pre-test sample, for example, you have 10, then you give to 10 people the same. Okay, but it's good that you give if you plan to do test retest, better start with a bigger, about 30 samples, because sometimes for you to do retest, some of them will not answer. So at least you have for the test actually the end will be different, is only for 20 people only, and what is the value? It's okay, that one.
Okay, for reliability analysis, should we do both test retest and internal consistency together, or just either one?
Reliability is a must. The test you can do both. You can do both. Some people they have test retest. They also have combat. You can do both, but at least minimum one. Whether combat or core, but most of the time it's combat or core.
Okay. Can we test face validity before content validity?
It must be valid by expert first. So the content first.
All right. And then for the scoring of understanding of question, how do we enter and analyze by the decision? And do we use SPSS? Can you provide some concrete examples?
Yes. All the you can use Excel. If you want to use calculate the CVI, you can use the Excel only. Just a simple formula for you to calculate and get the CVI index and score. And for the scoring also, you can use Excel, or if you familiar straight away to the SPSS, you can go straight away to SPSS and get the total of the score. It's actually a very basic formula to get the score. And depends on the questionnaire. If the questionnaire already have the scoring, you have to follow. You have to follow the original one, especially when you adopt. You have to follow the original one.
And are all the steps in the flow diagram of content validity are compulsory for validation of all types of questionnaire, or some of the steps may be excluded in some situations?
As I said just now, if you translate, it's good that you do the content validity. If you straight away take it from the Malay version, no need to do this content validity. You may skip a lot of things.
Can we use the same group of experts for phase and content validity of each item draft after modification each time?
Yes. Most of the time we are using the same expert.
So are there any more questions from the participant? Oh, there's one more. What is the recommended EFA analysis method? What extraction method is preferred for medical field? Does parallel analysis method better than PCA extraction?
Okay, most of the times we are using Varimax rotation methods, and then Varimax rotation, and we use principal components PCA extraction. But it also depends. Some you may use the the factor exists. Okay, so it depends on the aim of your questionnaire also. Okay, so yeah, the things actually go back to your research question of your aim of the questionnaire. Whatever is actually, whether it is CCA or parallel, actually is actually both can. Okay.
If there is no questionnaire validated before as a gold standard, can we omit the criterion validity?
Yes, yes. I mentioned just now you may not do because there's no gold standard.
For forward and backward translation, is it justifiable to use one translator for each process?
Okay, as I said just now, most paper recommended two because there are some bias is one. So because when you have to, when your discussion, when you sit down, there is a variety of contents of the items of the translation. So the best is actually two. So why you want to do one? Because you know already the best is two.
If this is a totally new questionnaire, not translated from any other language, is content and phase validity enough, or what? Or do we have to do all the steps in the flow diagram all the way until EFA and CFA?
Yes, yes, full validation, all the steps.
Okay. How about predictive validity? Still need to do?
No need to do if you don't have. It depends. If you have something to measure as a gold standard, then you can do. If you do not have, then no need to do. Criterion is not a must. The must actually more towards the construct validity, content validity. That one is actually the main task.
So any more questions from the participants? All right. Does EFA and CFA need different data sets?
Yes, yes, different data set. EFA coming from the pilot study, CFA coming your real study data collections. The population, the study population, the respondent different.
Any more questions? So if there are no more questions, then we thank Prof. Azma once again. And the next session will start at 11:50. So let's take a short break, a 7-minute break before we move on to the next session. So thank you.